Indo-Pacific Alliance trade bloc. The Korean government inaugurates a new national organization tasked with cleaning up fine dust air pollution. At its helm is the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And with Korea's GDP growth in negative territory, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi says the government will have a plan in the next month or two to boost investment in sectors including memory chips. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to our afternoon broadcast. I'm Devin Whiting. The government has officially launched a high-level council to come up with policies to combat the fine dust pollution plaguing Korea. Our Kim Mo-gan was at the inauguration ceremony.
The inauguration ceremony of the National Council on Climate and Air Quality kicked off at the Korea Press Center in central Seoul on Monday. Under the leadership of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the council comprises more than 40 members, including politicians and industry experts. During his opening remarks, Ban vowed to devote the rest of his life to resolving the fine dust problem. He also pledged to focus on coming up with step-by-step countermeasures to tackle the fine dust, which is especially serious in Korea from December to May.
We will first focus on effective short-term policies to reduce fine dust during this time of the year. In the long term, we will work comprehensively in various sectors to dig for meaningful accomplishments, because the fine dust problem is closely linked with transportation, manufacturing, energy, and other industries.
By May, the State Council seeks to gather a group of citizen representatives to hold an open debate to listen to public opinion on possible solutions to the issue. It will then hold several polls and town hall meetings with experts to hand over its final policy proposal to the government by next year. To fully eradicate the fundamental cause of the fine dust problem, the Council also plans to seek cooperation with China and other Northeast Asian countries that are suffering from similar conditions. Some 100 people attended the ceremony, including Presidential Chief of Staff No Young-min, Seoul Mayor Park Won-sun, and Environment Minister Cho Myung-rae. No, who spoke on behalf of President Moon, said that the Blue House will strongly support the Council's activities and openly look into its proposals.
The Blue House trusts that the Council will do its best. We hope that the Council will work with strong determination to create policies that the public can feel and sympathize on. The presidential office will actively reflect the Council's findings to the nation's policies.
Though the fine dust issue certainly won't be fixed overnight, the Council vows to do whatever it can to bring back a clean environment where citizens can breathe freely once again. Kim Mo-gan, Arirang News.
Last week, in a summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, Russian President Vladimir Putin brought up the long-stalled six-party talks as a way to approach the North Korea nuclear issue. The U.S., though, is saying it would rather see another one-on-one meeting between the North Korean leader and President Trump. Kim Yo-sun has this report.
U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has made it clear that multi-party talks with North Korea are not the preferred method the Trump administration is pursuing to achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Speaking on Fox News Sunday, Bolton said the six-party talks have failed in the past, explaining the North's leader has, at least up to now, wanted one-on-one contact with the U.S. Bolton's remarks are in reference to the revival of the past six-party talks approach, as suggested by Russian President Vladimir Putin after he met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un last week. However, the top U.S. security advisor stressed this does not mean Washington will not consult with other countries. He highlighted that President Trump continues to stay in close contact with his Japanese, Russian, Chinese, and South Korean counterparts. He also went on to explain that Trump is prepared to hold a third North Korea-U.S. summit at the right time. Speaking about the Kim-Putin summit, Bolton said the Russian leader isn't overly interested in bilateral trade with Pyongyang, but is focused on pursuing the so-called three mega projects. The projects refer to the connection of the Trans-Siberian Railway, Trans-Korean Railway, and the construction of a gas pipeline from Russia to South Korea via the north. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has emphasized that Russia is acting in its home region when building relations with neighboring North Korea. Commenting on last week's Russia-North Korea summit, President Putin's press secretary highlighted that Russia shares a border with the north. He also said when Washington deals with Pyongyang, it's acting in Russia's region. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
President Trump, meanwhile, has hinted again at demanding that South Korea pay more to have American troops here. Speaking at a rally in Wisconsin on Saturday, local time, Trump said the U.S. spends $5 billion to defend a wealthy country, though he didn't specify which one. He called the defense cost-sharing deal with the unidentified country a, quote, one-sided, horrible deal. Seoul and Washington signed a one-year deal in February to keep American troops here, after which Trump claimed he'd made Seoul pay $500 million more. In fact, South Korea agreed to pay $70 million more, for a total of $925 million. Senior defense officials from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will meet in Seoul next Thursday to discuss military cooperation and regional security issues, including North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Seoul's defense ministry said Monday it's currently narrowing down the agenda for the deputy minister-level officials at the 11th Defense Trilateral Talks. The talks are taking place at a time when military relations between South Korea and Japan have soured after Japan claimed that a South Korean warship had locked its radar onto a Japanese maritime patrol aircraft last December. Seoul has denied those allegations. Tours to the southern side of the joint security area, which had been halted since last October, will resume from this Wednesday. Tours had been stopped because of work to remove landmines and the withdrawal of military posts in the area. Both of those operations were part of the Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement signed last September, aimed at disarming the JSA. The military also says it's working with North Korea and UN Command to allow visitors access to the northern side of the JSA. South Korean nationals can apply for the tour online through the National Intelligence Service website. Foreigners can apply with tour agencies listed on the websites of the NIS or the Unification Ministry's Office of Inter-Korean Dialogue. At South Korea's National Assembly today, 4 parties might try yet again to fast-track some controversial reform bills. But the main opposition Liberty Korea Party is still standing by to block any such attempts. Since last Thursday, 2 parliamentary committees have been attempting to fast-track 4 bills, one on electoral reform, one on creating an independent body to investigate corruption among government and public officials, and another to boost the investigative authority of the police. Those efforts have failed, though, because of strong resistance from the main opposition. The ruling Democratic Party is urging the conservatives to end their protests and join the negotiations. Meanwhile, the minor opposition Bareunmirae Party is offering to submit a bill of its own on the independent anti-corruption body and to put its own version on fast track to ease internal tensions. The party's been divided after its leadership replaced 2 of its committee members who said they would vote against the fast track move. President Moon held a bilateral summit today with the president of Chile, Sebastián Piñera. Their discussions were mainly related to upgrading their economic cooperation and getting South Korea an associate membership in the Latin American regional trade bloc, the Pacific Alliance. Park Hee-jun has this report.
South Korea and Chile have agreed on having stronger bilateral relations in a wide range of areas, mainly focusing on economic cooperation.
한국과 칠레는 각각 아시아와 중남미 지역을 대표하는 경제 허브입니다. 오늘 피네라 대통령과의 정상회담으로 양국 공동 번영의 미래가 한층 앞당겨졌다고 확신합니다.
During President Moon Jae-in's summit with Chilean President Sebastián Piñera at the Blue House on Monday, the 2 sides agreed to cooperate further in a range of areas, including the 4th Industrial Revolution and e-government, areas in which the 2 sides signed MOUs. They also signed a comprehensive agreement on defense. Seoul and Santiago will also work to upgrade their free trade agreement, which they agree has been crucial in advancing trade between the 2 countries. Trade volume between South Korea and Chile has increased 4-fold to $6.2 billion since the agreement came into effect in 2004. Another focal point at the meeting was South Korea's associate membership of the Pacific Alliance. The Pacific Alliance is a Latin American trade bloc made up of 4 countries bordering the Pacific Ocean: Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and Peru. They make up nearly 40% of the total Latin American GDP. President Moon expressed his interest in Korea joining the alliance in hopes of increasing trade between the two regions, to which President Piñera said Chile will help make it happen.
South Korea has shown interest in the Pacific Alliance. We are set to chair the alliance. We fully support South Korea becoming an associate member from an observer.
President Piñera also promised to continue supporting the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. The two leaders shared their belief in the importance of dialogue to help achieve complete denuclearization and permanent peace in the region. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
President Moon gave a harsh evaluation today of the nation's economy. In a weekly meeting with his top aides, he called for faster progress in creating new industries in the face of outside uncertainties. He added that his government should work to foster industries like system semiconductors, biu-health, and future automobiles, so they become the country's new growth engines.
경제는 타이밍입니다. 추경 처리가 늦어질수록 국민의 삶과 민생 경제에 부담이 늘어납니다.
He said the supplementary budget bill worth $5.8 billion aimed at improving the economy and the country's air quality should be swiftly taken care of by Parliament. Back in February, the government set up the Export Trade Response Team, tasked with finding new growth engines in terms of exports. They met for the second time on this Monday and announced plans for several industries, including rechargeable batteries. Kim Da-mi has the details.
The Export Trade Response Team, headed by the Minister for Trade, discussed ways to foster new growth engines, as well as investing some $278 million to boost sluggish exports. It said it will focus on investing the extra budget on financially assisting local exporters, as well as helping the firm's marketing programs. In particular, it said it would focus on fostering new growth engines for exports, including rechargeable batteries, biotechnology, and consumer goods. Exports of rechargeable batteries increased by 12% on-year in the first quarter of 2019, thanks to higher demand for lithium-ion batteries for electric cars. In order to support reusable batteries as a newly emerging export item, the Industry Ministry introduced plans for developing core technologies and R&D projects on its commercialization. Next month, the ministry will announce detailed measures to further expand the consumer goods exports, which took up almost 5% of the country's total exports last year. These measures will include using the popularity of the Korean wave Hallyu to market consumer goods. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
At a meeting this morning of economy-related ministers, Korea's finance chief announced plans in the works to help support the struggling local economy. Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea's finance minister has admitted that the 0.3% fall in GDP growth in the first quarter, the slowest pace since the global financial crisis, is concerning, and vowed to come up with measures to boost private investment.
I feel it heavily that GDP growth fell 0.3% on quarter on falling exports and investment. We'll strengthen on-site communication with large companies and medium and small-sized companies and come up with an investment plan for various sectors, including system memory chips, by around May and June.
System memory chips are a type of non-memory chip used for data processing and image sensors for driverless cars and AI. Korean chip makers lead the global market for memory chips like NAND flash and DRAM, accounting for over 60% of global market share. But they only take 3% of the global non-memory chips market, which recorded $310 billion of revenue last year, more than double that of memory chips. Samsung Electronics also announced plans last week to invest $116 billion in non-memory chips by 2030. On rising global oil prices following the U.S. announcement to end exemptions on Iranian oil sanctions, Minister Hong said the government will help boost the number of discount gas stations and help local petrochemical companies diversify oil imports. To help support economic growth, the finance minister again emphasized the need to pass the $5.9 billion extra budget bill at the National Assembly as soon as possible, and said there is no plan to revise government's GDP growth forecast of between 2.6% and 2.7% as of now. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
The American Chamber of Commerce in Korea has asked the U.S. Congress and the Trump administration not to apply new tariffs on Korean cars. These are the tariffs proposed on national security grounds. An AmCham delegation back from a meeting in Washington with U.S. officials spoke to reporters on Monday, saying that if the U.S. exempts Korea from the tariffs, it won't regret it. The chairman of the AmCham Foundation, Jeffrey Jones, said the Commerce Department and the White House are looking into the matter, but the final decision is President Trump's. Jones said he had explained how the Section 232 tariffs would undo the benefits of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. The markets have now closed here in Korea, and they'll open in a few hours in the U.S. to start the week. So it's time for a look ahead on this Monday with Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute, who joins us on the line. Thanks for coming on, Dr. Hwang.
Thanks for having me today.
Well, let's start with the surprise GDP numbers from the U.S. First quarter growth beating expectations at 3.2%, sending the S&P and the NASDAQ to new record highs. Are we in for another week of gains?
Surprisingly strong U.S. first quarter economic growth boosted the U.S. stock markets to the record highs. In line with the strong GDP growth, the first quarter earnings results, which were better than market expectations so far, are driving stock markets index up even further. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.31%, and the Nasdaq Composite added 0.34% as of close on Friday. The S&P 500 gained 0.47% to 2939, its second record closing high for the week. Gains in the global stock markets are more likely to be capped by caution over less upbeat aspects in the GDP report, which points out some weakening ahead. The strong GDP data helped to ease fears of an imminent recession. However, investors need to be aware that the recent gaining was driven by a smaller trade deficit and a large accumulation of unsold merchandise as consumer and business spending slowed sharply.
Well, Korean stocks have been a different story entirely. There's been a plunge in earnings at major companies coupled with rising oil prices. How are things looking here domestically?
South Korean shares edged up on Monday as foreigners bought local stocks ahead of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy decision this week. The benchmark KOSPI rose 1.70%, while the KOSDAQ added 1.30%. Seoul market ended Monday on a high note, following data showing U.S. GDP grew at a faster 3.2% annualized rate in the first quarter. However, worse than expected on average earnings results along with rising crude oil price may well limit the stock market rally based on the fragile economic fundamentals. Tech and auto stocks led gains, with market bellwether Samsung Electronics rising 2.9%. Number 2 chip maker SK Hynix gaining 1.78%, and top car maker Hyundai Motor Company climbing 2.58%. Leading steelmaker POSCO gained 0.98%. Among losers, national flag carrier Korean Airlines declined 0.45%, and Asiana Airlines shed 5.05%.
Got it. Well, you mentioned the Fed Open Market Committee meeting this week. Also, earnings due from Apple and Google. What should we be watching there and elsewhere?
Investors are awaiting a meeting of the U.S. Federal Reserve, earnings reports, and Chinese factory data for further clues on the stock market movement. The Fed meets Tuesday and Wednesday in a week heavy with earnings news and some key economic reports. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is expected to emphasize the Fed will continue to be patient and hold back from raising interest rates. The March reading for core personal consumption expenditures, the Fed's favored inflation measure, is due later on Monday. There are more than 150 S&P 500 companies reporting earnings this week, including Apple, Alphabet, and drug majors Merck and Pfizer. Markets will also be looking to global factory activity surveys this week, particularly official and private readings on Chinese manufacturing, which will both be released on Tuesday.
All right, we'll be watching all of those, but that's where we'll have to leave it here today. Dr. Huang, thanks as always for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Now, investors in the Korean stock market will want to note that the Korea Exchange has shortened pre-market trading hours starting today. This is to reduce the possibility of unfair trading. Until now, pre-market trading had occurred from 7:30 to 9 a.m., but it'll now be just 1 hour long from 8 to 9. Also, investors used to have a full hour to trade at the closing price of the previous session, but that'll now be just 10 minutes long from 8:30 to 8:40. This affects the Kospi, the Kosdaq, and the smaller Konex. The city of Seoul is looking to improve its zero-pay mobile payment system by providing additional payment options and discounts starting in May. According to the Seoul Metropolitan Government, consumers will now be able to make payments using their own QR codes on their smartphones rather than having to scan the zero-pay QR code provided by the vendor. Seoul City is also working to provide discounts to users who choose to use zero pay at public facilities like parks along the Han River, Seoul Grand Park, the World Cup Stadium, and public parking lots. Small businesses can benefit from a 0% commission rate, and consumers are offered 40% tax deductions when they use zero pay. Gasoline prices in Korea have risen for a 10th straight week, hitting a near 5-month high. According to the Korea National Oil Corporation, fuel prices nationwide averaged about $1.24 a liter in the 4th week of April, the highest since December. Gas prices are expected to soar even further in May, with Washington's decision to end the waivers it had granted to sanctions on oil from Iran. To ease the burden, the Korean government said it will extend its tax cut on fuel until the end of August. An outbreak in China of African swine fever has caused pork prices in South Korea to soar from a month ago by nearly 17%. According to the Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, the standard price of pork used by wholesalers this month was almost $4 a kilogram. From 3 months ago, that's up 36%. That increase was passed down to consumers as well. The retail price of the most popular cut, pork belly, also rose 10% to nearly $16 a kilo. That brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.